Welcome to the Dumb Idea Podcast Show with Mike and Alex. We thank you for joining us as we have a couple of beers and a cigar and talk about what's going on in our lives. Grab an adult beverage and a smoke and settle in with us. Please like, subscribe, and comment on each show so we can hear whether you agree or disagree with our take on things. Listen wherever your favorite podcasts are and at www.dumbideapodcast.com. So we're going to try something a little bit different, but not too different. Anyone who's listened to this show knows Mike and I like to talk about cars. Not mechanics, but just kind of enthusiasts that we like certain cars and have a little bit more knowledge than the average Joe about cars. And then we got to thinking, what were cars that the everyman could afford, but were really fast, like the old wolf in sheep's clothing kind of car. Like, you didn't know it was coming, but they could smoke you off the line if they wanted to. Mm-hmm. So now we haven't talked about the cars before the show for the most part. Basically, I picked 5 that I thought were awesome. Mike picked 5 that he thought were awesome, but we didn't share which 5 we picked. So it's kind of be like our top 5 lists and the wolf in sheep's clothing car list. Now, there are a lot of these cars out there, so we're obviously going to miss some. But these are the 5 that we picked. We might even be able to do this show again and pick another 5 for each of us because there's that many out there. But and we both might have different criteria, so we'll kind of explain this as we go. But basically, we're looking for cars that could creep up on you at a stoplight. You think they're just average, ordinary cars. Someone bought it for like $15,000 or whatever, and then they just took off on you because it's got a beast under the hood, or just something you weren't expecting from something that looks ordinary. So, I don't know. How do we want to do this? Do you want to go first? You want me to go first?
So, I'll start off.
All right.
So, my first one is something that I actually considered buying. And I didn't buy it because I couldn't find one that was in decent enough shape. Mm-hmm. But the Ford Flex. So, you look at the Ford Flex, and it looks like a 2-box SUV.
Yeah.
Or a low-slung SUV or station wagon. But the Flex with the 3.5-liter EcoBoost had a stupid amount of power. That's the same engine they were putting in the Navigator, the F-150, that twin-turbo V6.
Yeah.
And it's kind of quirky looking. It almost looks like a... for anyone that doesn't know, it's almost like a Scion XB that just like on steroids. Like it's just a boxy, weird looking vehicle, but they're actually have a lot of utility as well. They're so big inside. You've got 7 passenger seating and plenty of room in there for all your stuff and kids and whatever. It doesn't look like your average SUV, but again, if you're just sitting at a stoplight and you see it, especially, it would have to be the 3.5 liter version. It's a lot quicker than it looks.
Yeah, it's got the 3.5 without any enhancement on it coming out the gate. But when they put the twin turbo on it, that thing would scoot. Mm-hmm. I think it would weigh about 4,700 pounds. So it wasn't light.
No.
But the other thing is, like, if you just look at this thing, it screams grocery getter.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not even high enough to be an SUV. Like, it's literally a station wagon. Mm-hmm. Like, it harkens back to the old Volvo Rs.
Yeah.
Or no, the Vs, sorry. Mm-hmm. The Volvo, like, V70, like those just big, boxy station wagons.
Something tells me that might be making a reappearance on this.
They still make those. Like, Volvo did not ditch the wagon. It's like one of the only car companies that's still making wagons.
Yep.
And I'm in the, so I got some wagons on my list too. Mm-hmm. But no, the other thing about the Flex is that it's very, very practical.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's 3 rows, and it's a genuine 3 rows that you can sit.
Yeah, it's not crossover 3 rows, which is, hey, we want to make a third row, so let's cram a third row that only preschoolers can fit in without car seats. It's not legal,
right?
But let's cram this in the Nissan Rogue.
Right.
They're selling those with 3 rows, which it's normal-sized humans are not fitting three abreast in the third row of any of those small vehicles. So,
but they will. The Flex though, they can. Like I can fit in the back of the Flex.
Yeah,
it's almost the length of an Expedition.
Yeah.
It's that. I would say it's bigger than an Explorer, but it's almost the size of an Expedition as far as lengthwise.
Yeah, but it sits so low.
Yeah,
it almost looks like. And there are packages that people get, and they. I don't know if, like back in the 60s and 70s, the SoCal surfer boys would get the station wagons and slam them down, and to carry their surfboards back and forth to the beach in. So it almost harkens back to that.
I'm surprised Ford never did like the Woody version.
Oh, Woody,
because it is. It is designed and set up where they could slap like the wood panel on the side or the lower third, and that thing would be a great retro edition Woody.
Yeah, maybe they were afraid of doing it with the. Remind people too much of a Dodge Aries K with wood stickers on it.
Yeah, the only other issue, I don't think it sells like hotcakes. Because I think a lot of people will have issues with the styling itself. Because it is, you're right, it's two boxes on wheels. I kind of like the styling though.
Yeah,
I think it looks all right.
I thought it was neat. And when I was going to get one, I thought this thing's going to stay. I'm not going to lose it in a parking lot.
No.
Now the Fusion I ended up buying, lose it in the parking lot, and it's silver. Like it's lost in the parking lot.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to lose that thing in the parking lot. So yeah, that's my that was my lead off. So
that's a good one because it's definitely attainable for the everyman too. Right now you can get one probably under 50,000 miles.
Oh yeah.
Granted, car prices are jacked up right now, but easily affordable, probably around the 14, 15 range.
Well, no, that's what kind of drew me to it. Was my cap when I was buying that vehicle was 20.
Yeah, and
it fit under there. It's just I wasn't finding them close enough, or with the miles I wanted, or with the stuff I wanted in it. Or when I did find them, they were. I didn't feel like spending that much money on it, so it was kind of. I just wasn't hitting the mark.
Kind of the cousin of it was the Lincoln MKT, which was like the faux hearse, because that back end of it was horrendously large.
Yeah.
But I drove one, I sat in one. They sat very differently. For the MKT, for me, it sat a little bit higher, so a little bit more like an SUV, but it kind of went with Ford's motif of kind of making their cars on the inside feel narrow.
Yeah.
Like with the last gen Explorer, it felt narrow inside. But when you got in the Flex, it didn't have that feeling. Like for whatever reason, that was the one car that came out of Ford when right after they redid the Taurus and the Explorer, where those felt real tight. The Taurus was supposed to be a full-size sedan. The back seat was cramped. It felt narrow.
Oh, that car feels smaller than it needs to be.
It was an abomination. Yeah. It should have been much bigger for a full-size sedan, and they just botched it because when you sat inside, you did not feel like it was a big sedan. And the same thing with the Explorer. It didn't feel like it had the width. It didn't feel like it had enough space on the inside. But when you sat in the Flex, it was probably about the same size as an Explorer, but it felt much bigger on the inside. Then top it off, you can throw a twin turbo in it and scoot.
Yeah.
All right, now you got my attention. And yeah, it just had, for me, it had nice looks. I know a lot of people just don't like it, but I think if I had to convince my wife to get one, I think she'd be like, I don't know if I want to be seeing that.
Yeah, that's the thing with it. The styling is so kind of out there that you really have to be into it.
Yeah.
And me being a car person, I was into it because you don't see a whole lot of them around. I think there's one in the neighborhood.
Yep.
And it's not a twin turbo version.
No.
But there's one in the neighborhood. You just see them around, and it's just something that, unless kind of like the Scion XB, I thought they were cool too.
Yeah.
But that kind of bread wagon, old school look to it. The Flex almost needed to have barn doors in the back.
Yeah.
It would have been even cooler.
That would have been awesome.
Yeah.
Kind of like how the Mini does it.
Yeah.
With the Clubman.
Yeah. And with that, but I think for your average car buyer that looks at their car no more than an appliance, they're not going to be too down with it.
No.
So, and that would be most car buyers. It's an appliance.
All right.
So
Next car. I'm going with my top one. And you and I talked about this one a couple weeks ago. Chevy made a car that essentially looks like the Chevy Malibu. But lo and behold, there's an LS1 under the hood, and it's rear-wheel drive, and it's the Chevy Ss.
yes,
Now, Chevy screwed this car up 10 ways to Sunday.
yeah,
And a lot. So one was the styling. They basically took a Malibu top and put it on a Chevy bottom. So they didn't differentiate it from the Malibu, so everyone thought it was a front-wheel drive car. And then on top of it, the Malibu didn't have a really big back seat, whereas this one had more legroom in the back. Mm-hmm. It would have thrived as a family sedan where the Malibu was kind of shrunk in the back. So like it was going to be tough to even put a teenager back there and fit behind the first seat. But this thing, perfect size, rear-wheel drive, huge engine underneath, and I mean, it was the Holden Commodore they brought over from Australia. They used it as their police car that they tried to sell to people. Unfortunately, not too many police departments bought it either.
yeah. Because I think what Chevy was thinking with that was that because they sold it, the police package was called the Caprice, and I think they thought that the Caprice would pay the bills, and then the SS would be like just cheddar on top. But the police departments didn't get into it because a lot of them are switching over to SUVs anyway. Yeah. And the Caprice had some things that police departments didn't like. There's no column shifter. So anyone that's seen the inside of a police car knows that there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes in there. And column shifters are nice when you have all the radios and computers and printers and all this other crap that goes in there. This still had a floor-mounted shifter.
Yeah.
So you had that. That was just a bad, not a good look. Yeah. The car itself, it was. I'm not sure what kind of engines they offered in them. Every now and then you'll see Maryland State Police. They have a couple of them that are floating around, but none of them in their new paint scheme. So they're all older cars. I think they only bought them for a year or two.
Yeah.
And then I think the SS, because it wasn't getting traction there, and no one could really draw the comparison between the SS and the Caprice, they never really put two and two together. But it's a really cool car that I would have, like, V8. You read any car magazine, and what do they want? V8 rear-wheel drive sedans. Yeah. And here was one, and nobody bought it.
I think part of their issue was the naming of the car. They named it the SS. Now, the SS is usually a badge for Chevy.
Or a package, yep.
So they should have. I feel like they should have marketed it to the public as a Caprice. Mm-hmm. I mean, they had Caprices in the past.
Yeah.
I think the problem was they didn't want to make it big enough to compete with the Impala. I think they had two cars. They should have done one.
Yeah.
They should have dropped the front-wheel drive Impala, renamed the SS either the Impala or the Caprice, had an SS badge version, which was essentially the police version.
Yeah.
With the LT engine in it, whatever, or LS engine in it, whatever they had in it. They should have made it a package, not the car.
Yeah.
Because it was the right size car for a full size sedan. Now they could have bumped out the trunk a little bit to make it longer to fit it in that full size frame, but I think Chevy just missed. Not on the car. The car itself was good.
Yeah.
But Chevy missed the boat as far as the naming, the marketing, which was zero.
Right. Yeah.
I think they probably had a winner on their hands, and everyone else botched it.
Yeah.
Because the interior was nice on it too. They were kind of coming out of that. They were still doing the waterfall grills, but they were coming away from that stupid-looking generic stereo that they put in everything. They were going to screens at that point. So the interior, it was like the beginning of Chevy's new interiors, and they weren't bad. I mean, I'm not saying they're the highest quality, but they looked nice.
Well, one of the criticisms of of all of General Motors has been their interiors.
Yeah.
Just plastic junk.
Yeah.
And, they've done some good work to, and in that car especially, they really did a lot of good work to make it better. And then just, like you said, they didn't market it. Nobody knew what it was. Had they done the thing where they called it the Impala, and you had the Impala as the police car, and then now there's the Impala SS, and everybody, ooh, that's the same thing the cops get.
Yeah.
And just like in '96 with the Impala SS,
Right.
that was essentially just a civilianized version of the 9C1 police package in the Caprice.
Yeah.
So, they missed it. It's a shame because that was a cool car too.
It was, and I mean GM. Yeah, they were struggling to get like a foothold in the car market, and think about it this way: Ford's getting out of cars altogether. Mm-hmm. They're dropping the Taurus. They're dropping. I don't know if they're keeping the Focus, but the Focus is their world car.
Yeah.
But I think the Fusion's going to be gone, and they're selling all SUVs. I think there was going to be a little bit of a void for the American sedan that GM could have capitalized on with some good vehicles. I mean, the new Malibu is nice, but they essentially did what they should have done originally, which was make the back seat bigger.
Yeah.
The back seats, I feel like it's kind of like with the Lexus IS. The back seats kill these things. They're four-door sedans. You need to be able to put a human back there.
Yeah.
If I can't fit back there, I'm only 5'9".
Right.
If my knees are banging up against the front seat, it's off my list.
Yeah. And
right away.
Yeah. And now, granted, I don't sit in the back seat of my own cars generally, but when you start talking about car seats and things like that, if a person can't sit back there, and then you put a car seat with a little kid in there, now he's kicking the back of your seat, and I'm 6'2", so every car I drive, the seat's all the way back.
Yeah.
And now I can't drive my car because if someone else is sitting back there, now I'm pushed forward too to make them fit.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know why they insisted upon keeping the front wheel drive sedan, because the Impala, the actual Impala, is now dead too.
Right. That was a nice car though.
Yeah, and the thing is, you could get that for like nothing right now, or last year.
Well, if you want a nicer version, go get the Buick LaCrosse, because that car. And for a while, that car has been big enough where, like, you and I we could sit in the back seat. It's got plenty of room. In fact, the Cadillac XTS was the Cadillac version of it. If you can find those, they're really comfortable to sit in. Now, it doesn't fall in, it's not a wolf in sheep's clothing, so it doesn't fall in this category.
Yeah.
But just as a generally nice car to drive, if you can find a Cadillac XTS. They made it for like 3 model years before they switched to the new naming and everything. Just a nice car to drive. Yeah. Very pleasant.
Definitely, yeah.
All right, what's your next car?
So, my next one, I'm not sure whether to split it up into 2 different ones or just talk about one. And then, so Ford used to have SVT,
right? Special Vehicle Team.
And everyone's heard of the SVT Lightning, the F-150, which in and of itself, I mean, is, and I'm not talking about the Raptor of today. I'm talking about the old F-150 Lightning.
Right.
2-wheel drive, pickup, super fast. But there were 2 cars that they're hard to find right now, or they've always been hard to find because they're SVT cars. But again, they kind of meet the criteria of if you pull up next to one, you're really not going to know that it's packing, that it's packing heat. The one is the SVT Focus, the original iteration of the Focus that came over here in the early 2000s.
Yeah, the bubble butt.
Yeah, and then the other one's the SVT Contour.
Yeah,
and the Contour was such a nice looking car. They're small, not big. I guess it kind of replaced the Tempo. Would have been what the Contour replaced. Bigger than an Escort, smaller than a Taurus type of deal.
Yeah.
But the SVT Contour, I always liked them. They're small, they're nimble. And I think with the Contour, the focus is more on handling more so than just all-out speed.
Yeah.
But you don't see them. If I see one, I'm like, ooh, like, my wife, like, she cares. Right. I'll say, ooh, it's an SVT Contour. She's like, a what? And literally, she cannot pick it out.
Yeah.
It just looks like an old sedan, like a old late 90s, 2000s sedan.
It's got like a couple SVT badges on it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And what I liked about Ford with the SVT, it wasn't ridiculous decals and wings. It was very subtle.
Yep.
Even the SVT Focus. Now, I'm sure there's someone out there that goes and rices it all out.
Yeah.
But factory SVT cars were very, very subtle in their badging, appearance. You didn't know what it was until you had to. It's almost like you had to know what it was to know what it was.
Right.
So,
a lot of the mods were mechanical.
yeah.
I mean, the shocks got stiffened, roll bars got stiffened, sway bars. I mean, they were just, everything was beefed up.
Yeah.
I mean, some would say it was like what the car should have been before they put it out.
Before the bean counters got to it.
Right. And I remember that car because it came out right when the Taurus lineup changed. Mm-hmm. And that Contour, the SVT, was supposed to take the place of the original Taurus show. Mm-hmm. They were about the same size. It was when the Taurus was starting to get bumped up size-wise.
Yeah.
So it was going from like mid-size to like mid-full size. That was, the Taurus was going up. Mm-hmm. Because what they were doing was they were trying to, everyone who bought a Taurus, they were the first-gen Taurus, or even first, second-gen Taurus, they were starting to get older, bigger kids. And the idea was we want to keep them in the family.
Yeah.
So we'll just make the car that they're used to shopping for bigger so that they'll just buy another Taurus.
Right. And it worked because, I mean, it was the top-selling car,
Right.
you know, for a long time. That and the Accord, they ran all together all the time.
So the Contour, though, that's when that came out. And it was very similar in size to the original Taurus. Mm-hmm. The original Taurus wasn't a huge car.
No.
It wasn't the full mid-size car that it ended up being, and it definitely wasn't the full-size car that they're trying to claim it is now. Yeah. But I mean, it was just a nice car. Like I was going to say, if you wanted like a newer version of the original Taurus SHO, the Contour is probably your way to go. I think the other problem was, though, like the when they did the Taurus, it was a nice interior kind of for the most part, and I think they kind of cheaped out on the Contour's interior.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I would probably say the reliability is not there because you don't see any of them anymore.
Yeah, you might see one on Cars and Bids.
Yeah.
I follow this thing. It's called Cool Craigslist Cars. You might see one pop up there.
Yeah.
But yeah, you don't. It's not something you spot in the wild all that much.
Yeah. I just don't think many people bought them either.
No, and again, it was an SVT car, so it was a limited run vehicle.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not like they were. I mean, you had to be an SVT dealer to even sell them.
Yeah.
And I think the way I forget, it was volume. You had to lead with a certain amount of volume,
right? And
then they spaced them out through their regions or districts, so there were only so many. I mean, there's a Ford dealership when I was in college that was an SVT dealer, and you can go get. So me and my buddy would drive up there and, drool over the F-150 Lightnings and the. I forget what the Mustang was. That
the Cobra.
Yeah,
the time?
The Ford SVT Cobra. Yeah. So you'd see stuff like that, but yeah, you don't see a whole ton of them out there. And the same with the Focus. You don't. And the ones that you do see, if you see one for sale somewhere, like unless it's got like stupid low miles on it, it's probably been dogged out. Someone's probably been running SCCA in it, or
especially with the Focus.
Yeah, or some kid's been out here running up and down Route 2 like a douchebag.
Well, to be honest with you, Europe got the better Focuses than we did. Mm-hmm. Europe's been getting the high-end Focus. Now, they've been getting it from years, like decades long. But in America, small cars really don't sell a whole ton unless it's like a Corolla.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, yeah. And the Europeans, they also get they get stuff we don't get, like
diesel.
Yeah. or the Ford Mondeo wagon, which is a fusion wagon.
Yeah.
They don't sell those here. Americans don't buy station wagons.
We don't.
But because of the way vehicles are taxed in Europe, it's all by engine displacement. So if you need an SUV in Europe, unless you're super wealthy, fuel's so expensive and the taxes are so high on the vehicles that you will buy the station wagon because you kind of get that space and utility.
Yeah.
Where here, it's, it costs the same much it costs the same amount to register. Like, granted, you have your trucks and stuff like that, but it's not that much difference between a Suburban and a Sienna,
Right.
To register it for 2 years.
No, it's just good. They're all classified as a certain weight vehicle.
Yeah,
And that's it.
yeah. So
This is actually a good segue into my next car, though. So my next car was the 89 to 95 show. The Taurus show.
Yeah,
This was the original Trailblazer car from Ford into where they brought their SVT cars to the masses. Mm-hmm. This was like the OG.
yeah,
And this was another one, though, that it will creep up on you. Like, you won't even know what it is if it comes up next to you at a stop sign or a street light or whatever it is. Because, like you said, they didn't plaster show
no,
in big bright badges.
Yeah.
Like on the front passenger door and the front driver door.
Yep.
It was like etched in the plastic.
Yep.
That
And
said
then on
SHO
and on the bumper. Yep.
Both. I think it was both bumpers. Like, it was on the front bumper on the side, but the back bumper was across the back. But it was body colored.
Yeah.
So if you weren't really looking for it, you didn't see it was there.
Right.
And it might have had, I think, SHO on the wheel caps.
Yeah, I think the wheels were different.
Little
Were
bit,
they
yeah.
body colored wheels?
No.
Okay.
No, they were silver wheels. Because so this is one car I've had. I had the last year version. I had the 95, 94, 95. And the funny part was my mother. She had a 94 originally. She bought hers new. I bought mine when it was like 10 years old. The cars were completely different. Like, the ride was different. Mm-hmm. The handling was different. The sound was different. And even the interior bits got a little bit nicer on the show than they did on the regular version of it. Mm-hmm. Like, my mother's was like a little bit more floaty. It was the grocery getter car. Like, masses of people bought these things. Mm-hmm. The show was lowered down.
Yep.
Tighter springs. Everything was stiffened up. The Yamaha engine that wasn't super fast. It only had like 205 horsepower. But the big thing with that is that it would rev to like 7,000 RPM.
Oh yeah.
Like, and
it's
the
like
other
a big
part
motorcycle engine.
Yeah. But the other part of it was you could get it in a manual. Mm-hmm. It was like you could get a big sedan in a manual. Now, the Japanese were doing that. Like, you could get Camrys in a manual. Yep. Accords you could get in a manual. In fact, Hondas were selling a ton of manuals back in the day.
This past, I want to say, last year was the last year for the manual in the Accord. Yeah, one just popped up on cool Craigslist cars. It was like, this car is cool, not because it's a Honda Accord, but because it's the last manual you could get.
Well, and the other problem in Honda, unless you got the two-door Accord Coupe, you couldn't get the V6 mated with the 6-speed manual. You had to get the 4-cylinder with the 4-door version. Yeah. And they've been doing that one for years. They stopped giving the option for the 6-speed manual with the 6-cylinder engine, so they didn't have that little pocket rocket kind of car. But the show, the 94-95 show, in my opinion, was one of the best cars that Ford ever put out. Mm-hmm. Very big, well, not very big, big usable sedan.
Yeah.
You could use it as your everyday car, no problem. But if you wanted to step on it, you had some go.
Yeah.
And it was just an interesting car. And I feel like, just like we said with GM kind of dropped the ball with the SS, I feel like Ford dropped the ball as far as the Taurus line in general.
Yep.
And then the show in general.
Well, because then, shortly after that, they switched over to the oval Taurus,
which killed the car.
Yeah, yeah. And the SHO stopped being that Yamaha-sourced, high-revving V6. Wasn't it a V6?
They switched it to a V8?
It was a V8. They crammed a V8 in there.
Yeah. The frog eyes?
Yeah. And they called it an SHO, but it wasn't an SHO.
No.
It was a front-wheel drive V8 sedan.
Yep.
Which part of me thinks is kind of cool when they cram a transverse-mounted V8 into a front-wheel drive sedan. Chevy did it with the 9th gen Impala.
Yeah.
I think Cadillac did it. Ford did it. Lincoln did, but they're just, again, you put it on a crappy transmission,
Right.
and front wheel drive doesn't inspire anything. But
even
it inspires torque steer.
Even if they would have done that, though, if they wouldn't have botched the car so bad,
Yeah.
like nobody wanted to be driving in something that looked like that on the next gen, like the 96, the 96, 97 version. It was like one of the ugliest cars. Like whoever let that get out of the design department should have been fired.
And the ovals were everywhere. Even on the inside.
All the radio.
The radio was this. Crutchfield guys were having a heart attack. Like, what do we do with this thing? The ovals were everywhere.
You burned the car. You just burned the whole thing.
And it wasn't cool like the RX-8, how it has that rotary looking triangle all over, like little cues inside the car. Because it's got a rotary engine. It's neat. Like, these are just worthless, stupid ovals.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the 90s threw up in there.
Yeah.
But
they had so much goodwill with that car, and they just threw it all the way with one bad design.
Yep. So, I guess
What's your you got by the way, we forgot to mention with that Chevy SS, by the way. Before they brought it as a Chevy SS, it was the Pontiac G8 GT. Mm-hmm. And then they killed Pontiac.
Yeah.
And then they had to figure out what to do with that car. All right. Anyway, moving on. All right. So, third car.
So, I'm going to go with the... so, it doesn't really qualify as a sleeper because they were built to go fast. However, you could get them... So, when I was in high school and later... You could get these cars. You'd see them in the old classified ads in the newspaper back before we had Craigslist and Auto Trader. You have to look up, find cars in the newspaper. Were the 3rd gen F bodies, so Camaros and Firebirds, and though they're made to go fast, it's kind of an every guy's car because any high school parking lot had a plethora of these things in them because you could get them for like $2 or $3 grand. And
you know what the 90s versions? Is that what we're talking about?
No, so
like the really pointy front end,
3rd gen F bodies. So we're talking 82 to 92.
Oh, okay.
So the IROCs.
I got you. So the lowered T-top, like
T.
Okay,
yeah.
All right.
And I had one. Actually, I had 2 of them. I had an IROC Z28, and I had it was called a Sport Coupe. Mm-hmm. The interiors were junk. They ran well. The 305 was a dog of a motor, but when you found that IROC Z28 for $2 grand, and you could scream in it, definitely one of those cars that, the old Italian retard out cruising. But, it wasn't the only IROC, though, because Dodge did the Daytona as an IROC as well. So, but no one calls that the Italian retard out cruising. But, no, those cars...
You just offended a lot of people.
But they were fun. They were fun cars to have. Insurance companies hated them. They had a back seat in them only to satisfy the insurance company, but to say that it could seat 4 people.
That's most two-door cars now anyway, though. Except with the exception of like 3.
Yeah. But that IROC Z28 that I had, it was just a big V8 in a light car. You could get them for a song. Now they're getting a lot more expensive because either the bodies rusted off of them, they died, or people crashed them. Yeah. So now the ones that are out there are a lot more expensive than they were. But you could pick one up.
I don't know why though. To be honest, this was one car I just never got into. it did nothing for me. I felt like it was more noise than go.
So the 305 cars, I'd agree with you.
Yeah. But then it had the GM interior, which like everyone who had a GM car back then knows exactly what this interior was, and knows that like within like after 5 months you bought it, it would just creak and rattle all over the place. Everything would, like all the cheap plastics would rub against each other. It was just like you just turn up the radio so you didn't have to hear your car. Yeah. The car's interior is rubbing up against each other.
So the dashboard was this flat expanse of plastic.
Right.
And they'd always crack.
Oh,
because the sun would hit it and it would crack, and they were cheaply made to begin with.
the radios look like shit.
Oh yeah, the trim around the radios looked like shit.
Awful. The shifters were I feel like they were plastic.
Yeah. Now both of mine. Well, my first one was a manual. My second one was an auto.
Mm-hmm.
But you'd have the AC vents was just a box.
Right.
Like they just stuck there. It had the gauge cluster was like just a box
Right.
that would sit there, just boxes everywhere. The T-tops leaked.
No.
But when you're an 18, 19-year-old kid,
It's the coolest thing ever.
awesome.
Yeah.
And you think the girls love them. The girls didn't love them.
You want the girls love? They loved how there was a guy with a car.
Yeah,
They
right.
didn't care what car it was. You could be riding around a crap box. They didn't care.
But they were easy to work on.
Yeah.
So I learned how to do a lot of work on cars plus it broke down all the time. But yeah, so it's, like I said, not a sleeper, but it's an everyman car. Certainly not, nothing hoity or elite about them.
Yeah.
And I think now Mustangs get a pass. For whatever reason, no one craps on the Mustang like they do the Camaros of that generation, but the same douchebags were driving the Mustangs that were driving the Camaros.
For whatever reason, the Mustang car people don't equate Mustang to Camaro. They equate Mustang to Corvette. And it's the worst comparison because they're not in the same league.
No.
Like the Corvette was a true sports car. The Mustang was basically a two-door econo box.
Yeah.
For the longest time. Now, don't get me wrong, when the Mustang first came out, it was labeled or pitted as a sports car. Mm-hmm. So the Corvette and the Mustang they were more similar.
Right.
But once you kind of hit the Fox bodies for the Mustangs, they definitely compared more to the Camaros.
Yeah.
As like two-door, everyman, affordable car. Yeah. And the Corvette just stayed true to its sports car nature.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, when the Corvette first came out in 1953, Ford's answer to that was not the Mustang. The Mustang didn't come out until 65. Ford's answer to the Corvette was the Thunderbird.
Yeah.
That was their answer to the Corvette. And then the Mustang comes out later. And I believe the first Mustangs were like they were 6-cylinder cars. They weren't like, drag cars.
Right.
But then they found they could put they came out with the Boss 302s and all this stuff that you could do to them easily, modify them easily. Then Chevrolet answered the Mustang with the Camaro.
Right. So,
but people think that the Mustang and you're right, the Mustang and Corvette are not competitors. Now, today they might be because, I don't know what Ford, it really isn't making anything to go right up against the Corvette. And the Mustang, you go for the Mustang, there's so much difference, I'm not sure what a base Mustang costs now compared to the most spec'd out specialty package you can get.
Yeah. I think there's a huge difference.
Oh yeah.
Like the base Mustang, I think you pick up for like 20, 25.
Yep.
25, probably not 20.
Yeah.
But I think like the Corvette now the Corvette's like it's now a mid-engine car.
Yeah.
Like they're trying to compete against like I don't even an
Ferrari.
Audi RS8 or whatever.
Yeah, they're trying to go out the European exotics. And some of this stuff I've seen is they're pretty damn close to it.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. It's just not what the Corvette always was. To me. I feel like they've definitely punched out of the weight class.
Yeah.
So like the Corvette for me was always the sports car that was accessible to the everyman a little bit.
Well, and the thing is,
they're getting rid of that.
Right. Like when I was a kid, I had a Camaro, an old Camaro, and my dad, just a government employee, could have driven a Corvette. Now that wasn't my dad at all. He drove a Dodge Caravan, but with the amount of like a middle class dad could afford a Corvette if he really wanted to. My
dad.
Yeah.
My dad had. While I was growing up, we had I think he had 3 Corvettes. Mm-hmm. 85-ish, 87-ish, and then when he got older, when I got older, I think he was a 90, 99, 98, mm-hmm. which I liked. I liked that
C5.
One. Around kind of. I mean, okay. It was a very flattish looking Corvette mm-hmm. at that time. He had the convertible, but again, not a rich guy,
Yeah.
but I think he picked up the 99 for about 20 grand used.
Well, there was stuff you could do with those where you could get that, and then you could get Lingenfelter made a package, the supercharger. You could put it came with a new hood, and you bolt on the supercharger, and so there was stuff you could do to them too if you wanted to.
He put on the quad tips, made it loud as hell.
Yeah,
I mean, it is what that was his car. That was his get around car because they live down south in Florida. You could put top down. Mm-hmm. They could drive around town with it. I mean, they had other cars to go distances, but that was their fun car.
Yeah,
but that was something. It was a car that the everyman could have, and now that's gone.
No, it's not. It's not unobtainium. It's not saline S7 stuff, but
isn't the new one like it starts at 80, 90
it's
grand?
still, yeah.
That's to me that's unobtainium.
It's unobtainium to me, but
right.
But if you think like you can get 80 grand would not be out of the question for a Silverado High Country.
That's true too.
Yeah,
so. I guess my mind's still back on old car prices, but
yeah.
But the next car I got on my list, and I don't know if people are gonna agree that these are sleepers, but I think they are. Mm-hmm. They're essentially minivans that just goes really, really fast.
Okay.
And it's the 2007 Mercedes-Benz R63. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to lump the E63 Wagon in there.
Okay.
Because the E63 Wagon and the R63, which was just the AMG version of the R Class. Mm-hmm. Even if you got just the regular versions of those, they still could scoot on you. But the funniest part of this was the R Class, the underpinnings of the R Class were the same as the Chrysler Pacifica back then, because that was back when the Mercedes and the Daimler Chrysler and the Chrysler tie-up was happening, right?
Yeah.
And so Mercedes needed like a minivan type car, but they had never made a minivan. They were just getting into SUVs. They were doing all right with them. They had the GL and whatnot, but they didn't have one that was lower to the ground.
Yeah.
And Chrysler didn't have, I think the minivan was gone at this point.
So the Pacifica was supposed to replace the
Caravan, right? Or the
Caravan.
Siblings, the Town and Country. Mm-hmm. Sure.
Caravan Town and Country was supposed to be replaced with the Pacifica. Mm-hmm. And then it didn't happen because the Pacifica really wasn't a very good minivan. So,
right.
And they kept making the minivan. Like Chrysler's the only one that's continuously made their minivan from, well, Toyota and Honda have as well.
Right.
But yeah, because GM's completely out of the game.
Yep.
Ford doesn't make one anymore either. So yeah, it's the only thing that's really, and that was going to replace it, and it didn't, because it didn't meet the needs of your minivan buyer. Because then the Pacific was kind of marketed as like a crossover SUV,
right?
Which it really wasn't. It was kind of a minivan with 4 regular doors.
Yeah, yeah.
And the R Class had 4 regular doors as well.
They were, I mean, other than some body cladding, the underpinnings were clones for the most part. A lot of it was Daimler-Benz parts. Mm-hmm. But with the R63 in general, it was essentially the R350 or the Pacifica, but had a 500 horsepower engine and went 0 to 60 in 4.7 seconds. Like this thing went.
Oh yeah.
And to be honest, if you ever see one on the road, it really, other than the R63 and the AMG badge on the back,
you're not going to notice it.
You will not know it's not an R350.
Yeah, and you're probably not even going to immediately pick it out as a Mercedes-Benz either.
Yeah, because it doesn't look like any other Mercedes-Benz that they've ever made.
No, it's the weirdest thing that for a couple of years they made this thing, and then they did an AMG package, which is really cool. It's almost like they're thinking, let's put something in the time capsule that's really going to throw them off. Right. That's going to throw them for a loop. But yeah, they did the same thing. Like they had the Crossfire, which shared a lot of parts with, what was it, the CLA? Yeah. One of those, but the interior, the Crossfire interior the Crossfire is just a goofy looking car.
People who drive them now, though, they love them.
Yeah.
They're also a bargain.
Yeah.
Now they're not what they didn't cost what they did back then.
Yeah. It had that little wing that would stick up. Stupid. Like, is that a Audi TT? No, it looks too dumb to be even that.
Right. But no, that was like, I like the like where it might not be a complete sleeper, but definitely it could creep up on you if you don't notice that that's the model coming at you. Now the the R350 was just pedestrian. The Pacifica was pedestrian.
Yeah.
But that R63 was crazy. Now the 6.3 was a garbage engine, and anyone who's ever watched YouTube knows that there's like a ton of videos on the Mercedes E63 wagon that just gets passed around from YouTuber to YouTuber that just never gets fixed. So I'm not saying go out and buy one. I'm just saying, hey, if you just went on the road, it could smoke you. But
right.
What's your next one?
So my next one, I'm kind of going to go to like the grandfather of it, and then go into what it is. So my grandmother had a Dodge Omni, and the Dodge Omni was kind of what saved Chrysler from oblivion in the 80s. So they had the Dodge Omni, Plymouth Horizon. From that, they built the Caravan, Voyager, Town and Country on the same chassis. But they took the Omni and they put a turbocharger in it, and it was the Omni GLH, which was Carroll Shelby was involved in it, and GLH actually meant goes like hell. So it's this little shitbox econo car with a turbocharged engine in it. It was pretty much the first hot hatch.
Right.
When you see them, they do have some graphics and badges on them. You're probably not going to see one outside of a car show anymore,
right? Because
they just didn't last. My grandmother's Omni was small and had no air conditioning, and it was the Chrysler's answer for the economy car.
Yep.
But then what ended up going down several generations later, they came out with the Dodge Neon, which replaced, between the Omni and the Neon was remember the Shadow?
Yep.
Dodge Shadow, like that was a weird car.
Yeah.
So then you go from that. I think the rental car fleets of every airport in the United States was full of those things.
Right.
But then you get to the Neon, which people think Neon and like, oh, that's the quintessential teenage girl car.
Sure.
Hey, here's a Neon to drive around in, 95 horsepower engine, like just nothing great about it at all.
Can't go fast enough to get yourself in trouble.
No. But Neons turned out to be really popular in the amateur racing circuits. So they came out with a Dodge Neon SRT4, which was a really cool car, very fast. They did some neat things with a turbocharger, and if I understand it correctly, it didn't have mufflers, so it kind of just, but it wasn't stupid loud. It was quiet enough to pass, inspections and the different laws and regulations. But because of the way they routed all the plumbing for the exhaust, it had a really neat exhaust sound.
Yeah.
And they were really, really fast. And you couldn't really pick them out from anywhere because they didn't do a whole lot of crazy badges on them. It had a hood scoop and I think different wheels and a wing.
A little wing, yeah.
Yeah, and that was it. But other than that, it looked like a Neon.
Yeah. If
you weren't a car person, you would have just passed it off as another Neon.
Reminds me, like the design of it reminded me of the Cobalt SS. Mm-hmm. Whereas, like, other than like the nicer wheels,
yeah,
you'd never know. Like, yeah. And why they did a Cobalt SS? They did it in response to the Neon.
Yeah.
But the funny part about both of those cars, they never changed the interiors, which were just pure junk.
Oh yeah.
So it's like nobody in their 40s is going to go buy one of those.
No.
Thinking, oh wow, this is great.
Right.
Just like, oh wow, this is disgusting.
Just like, and most people in their 40s aren't going to go buy a WRX STI.
No,
it's just too flashy. Now they'd buy a 92X Aero.
Right.
Same thing.
Although the 92X Aero was still small.
Yeah.
I feel like if you were going to do it, you'd go with the 9.5 Aero. Yeah. But that's another car that was kind of a sleeper back in the day because you didn't know.
Yeah. Now with the Neons, they did offer a lightweight package which came with carbon fiber body panels from the factory. They also came out with one that had one seat, 5-point harness, roll cage, because they were so popular with racing. That's what's going to happen anyway.
Right.
And the Neon actually was a really, when you do some mods to it, even in its base form, the Neon was you'd see them a lot on SCCA. In fact, there was a Neon class in, what is that, Rallycross.
Yeah.
Like an actual Neon class. So, with all the different mods from stock all the way up to whatever super mod that people would do. And that was essentially just that version of the car that you could buy from Chrysler already ready to go.
Yeah.
Like a track-ready car. So, but it was short-lived. Their Neon's now dead.
Yeah.
As is the Dart. That's dead too.
Right. So the next car I've got, this is going to be the controversial one, is whether people even think it should be on this list. Because it's pure stock.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing special about it. And it was the 2006 to 2010 Infiniti M45.
Okay, I'm liking it.
Or I would even lump in the M35 because in the 08 to 10 version,
mm-hmm.
I think there was only 30 horsepower difference between the two. The thing that got me with the M45 was, over 300 horsepower in a regular sedan. You could get it with all-wheel drive. And it was really nice to sit in. Like, for me, I'm a sucker for bells and whistles. And in 08, when they got the color gauges, like the blue gauges instead of the crap orange that Nissan was putting in everything from the Maxima to the Ultima,
yeah,
it was like black and orange. And it was just so monochrome. It looked ugly. But then in 08, they put in like the blue hue and like the color gauges, and everything got a little bit more colorful. Mm-hmm. Drove like a beast. The M45, but the M45 had more torque. Mm-hmm. So it just had more get up and go to it.
Yeah.
You could get it with the bigger wheels. You could get it with the sound system in the headrest. Or it wasn't it was in like the shoulder part of the seat.
That car was a pure luxury sedan.
Yeah.
Like it was, it was powerful and quick, but it wasn't, I never consider that a sports sedan.
Right.
And every manufacturer, and no one can see the air quotes, sport, like again, this is our 3 Series competitor. No, that was a luxury sedan. Now, the thing is, like, luxury sedans are supposed to be powerful and fast.
Right.
Rolls-Royce, they are powerful and fast. They always have been. But the M45, M35, like, they were just big, heavy, comfortable, kill miles in them sedans. But
that version, those years, you step on the gas and it went. Mm-hmm. It was really nice. It was easy, like you said, easy to crush miles in.
Yep.
With a little bit of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And the other reason why I put it on this list, and this had a big part of it. So it's like, you can get that car now with about 100,000 miles on it. Now, granted, it's a 10-year-old car, 11-year-old car. You can get it with about 100,000 miles, 12, 15 grand. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of car for.
Oh yeah.
But look, in normal car times, normal car prices under 10.
Yeah.
Not this COVID prices are
crazy.
But back before, see it around 10, 11,000, maybe even 8 or 9.
Yeah.
And still in great shape. It also had that flat, the matte wood look. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't the glossy wood dash. It was like a matte wood finish.
Yep.
Which was just different than what everyone else is doing. Now, I can hear people right now listening. They're probably, yeah, but Audi's got the S8, BMW's got the M5, mm-hmm. but those are specialty sports cars. This is not a sports car. It was never meant to be one.
Right.
But it will roll up on you. Look, I guess an S8 would roll up on you too, and you really wouldn't know. But you were paying like 100 something grand for an S8.
Yeah. This
thing was like 45 to 50 grand brand new.
Oh yeah. And the interiors of them were cool because they had that. So I went to the auto show one year and there was one there, and the way the nav and system and everything was, an infotainment was set up.
Yeah.
It was almost like it had a ledge with a whole bunch of buttons on top.
Yep.
And then another level down, but it still had the analog clock like Infinitis were putting in all their cars.
Yep.
I liked the previous generation of that car too.
Yeah.
Which was just, you don't see them a whole lot. Mm-hmm. It just looks really. It has to be black. You gotta black the windows out. Mm-hmm. It needs to be like windshield to tint all of it.
Yeah.
It looks like something that a mobster in Grand Theft Auto would be driving around in.
Right.
But they were that one and the one you're speaking of. Yeah, they were just big, comfortable, nice cars, and
it kind of has the cachet for me of like the early or the 2003 or 2000 to 2004 RL. Mm-hmm. Acura RL.
Yeah.
300 horsepower engine, mm-hmm. but super comfortable to drive. Yeah. But could just scoot. Yep. It could go. It wasn't anything special, but it's affordable as hell. Mm-hmm. And to me, like I definitely wanted to get like a regular car on here. Yeah. That like I could go out tomorrow, mm-hmm. buy and be super happy with. Yeah. Like I'm not going to go buy a Mercedes R63. I don't want the headache of a bill, right?
Yeah. Who wants to own an out of warranty Mercedes?
Correct. But if I go get that Infiniti, now this was before Infiniti and Nissan put CVTs and everything. Yeah. This was back when Infinitis were reliable. You could sit in it. That's why I put it on here. Mm-hmm. People could listen to this, go out tomorrow, look for them, and like, I'm going to go get one. Yep. I can afford that. Yep. And it's still in good shape, and I love to drive it. That's my kind of car.
Yeah, it still looks good.
To me, I like that body style. Yeah. I mean, it was like before all the swoopy lines and everything started coming about. I'm like, man, I don't dig all the swoops and loops and everything.
And, there's a thing about the way cars were designed in the, say, early 2000s, 90s, and before. Like, they had windows. Mm-hmm. It didn't feel like you were sitting in this. When I'm sitting in a car of today, it almost feels like, when you buy a new whatever, and it comes in the box, and then in the box there's the styrofoam. Mm-hmm. I feel like the thing that's inside the styrofoam. Right. Like, you're just in this, you can't see outside of them. There's there's screens everywhere. There's no glass. The glass area is really, really reduced.
Yeah. And the nannies on them.
Yeah. God. And I just, you sit inside of, like, even a smaller sports car like an Integra. Yeah. You sit in an Integra and like, wow, you can see stuff. Right. Right. Because the window still doesn't come up to your shoulder. Yeah. Which is kind of like every new car that way is, but like the windows still seriously come up to your shoulders. It's like, and I'm tall. Yeah. If you're short, like my wife probably looks like she's sticking her head out the turret of a tank. Right. Right.
People say that they feel like they're sitting in a coffin. Yeah. Basically.
Yeah, it's nuts. And now I think some of it they're trying to mimic that feel of like, sitting in the cockpit. Yeah. And the Europeans did that, the sport, like where you sitting low in the seat, you've got all this gauges and stuff around you, and that's great. But I've never flown an F-16, but I don't imagine they're that comfortable. Right. So why do I have to make my car feel like an F-16? Yeah.
I know the exterior looks better with it like that, but the interior feels awful. Yeah. And I agree. I mean, and I think that's why some of the cars actually feel more narrow now than they did before anyway. Yeah. Because you don't have that extra space that the window afforded you from like the ledge of the window where your shoulder could kind of creep over into, you know what I mean? But
you also didn't have all the safety stuff that stuff.
Well, sure, yeah.
But hey, you know what? Throw caution to the wind. Yeah. Now, my next one, I think I pretty much stayed entirely domestic, and this one is domestic too. Mm-hmm. But I love these cars. I always liked them. The Pontiac Grand Prix GTP, supercharged. So it was a supercharged Grand Prix.
What year were these?
So I'm going back to, let's say, 95, 96, before they got all swoopy looking.
So I'm going to agree with you, except for one thing. Mm-hmm. What year did they get rid of like the bubble pattern on the door?
So
like the wave pattern. On it.
Yeah,
You know what I'm
so-
talking about?
yeah,
And,
so-
they went to the flat doors.
yeah, so Pontiac was really good at putting polyps and barnacles all over their cars to build excitement.
Right, right.
And these cars, so this is when Pontiac used to run in NASCAR. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where, when I was a kid, seeing them, like Richard Petty drove one.
Right.
And like, okay, number 43, the King. But they were just like, now I mean, they're hard to find now.
Oh, yeah.
But they're like, back then, you could get them for, for a decent, short change. Like they weren't that expensive.
Yeah.
But again, it's GM, so the interiors were junk. So
Right.
the Pontiac, for whatever reason, these were the cars they first put the heads-up displays in.
Yep.
I think they did it with the Bonneville SSEI too.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
So the Bonneville, so they had the SSE, which was the top trim, but then they had the SSEI, which was the supercharged engine.
Yeah.
That thing would
Yep.
burn some rubber.
Yep.
It was it was just a big sedan that would move, but it had this huge V8 with a big old supercharger, and man, it was really comfortable to ride in though too.
Yeah.
Even the Grand Prix, same deal. Could get up and go. Was only a little bit smaller than the Bonneville, but was a comfortable car to drive. GM kind of did a good job as far as a soft, cushy ride back in the day, but also comfortable seats.
Yep. Yeah, the seats were soft and
They were nice,
yeah.
cushiony, man.
And again, with that other, I forget the GM, whether it was W bodies or whatever it was, but the Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme.
Yeah.
Not the Cutlass Calais, but the Cutlass Supreme. They supercharged that as well. And with the Oldsmobile, you also had the convertible option.
Yeah.
Which, I don't even remember that, but the convertible top, but it still had the roll bar.
Right.
That was, over top of it.
Looks stupid.
It looks so dumb.
Just let that go, guys. Let that go.
But the Pontiac, these ones had the taillights that were like, not honeycomb, but it looked like a checkerboard almost.
Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah. The steering wheel looked like a keyboard because there are so many buttons to control all the super functions on it.
I remember that car looking cool though, because it sat down on its haunches. Mm-hmm. Like it was, and when it had the body, the ground effects kit on it, it didn't look outlandish.
Yeah.
It looked like it was a really good looking car.
Yeah.
Like they kept those lines from front to back. Mm-hmm. They didn't bring the back end of it up real high, so it didn't have like the downward arrow kind of look. Like it had that nice flat line to it.
Yeah.
Sat really low. Nice size wheel. Like this is before big wheels were a thing. I think they put like 17s on it.
I remember when if a car had 18s, you're like, whoa.
Those were big rims back then. But man, I remember looking, and maybe I was thinking probably a little bit later in the Grand Prix era. Mm-hmm. But man, like I remember thinking those were nice looking cars, and even the regular version had that bulletproof V6 engine in it.
Oh yeah,
the 3800.
Yeah,
that they put in a lot of GM vehicles.
Yeah,
bulletproof.
Yeah, it was a pushrod V6,
like
and
the car was going to deteriorate around you first.
Yeah.
Before anything else.
Yeah, the transmission might blow up.
Sure,
but the engine was solid.
Oh yeah, that V6 lasts a long time.
Yeah,
and to be honest, the transmissions weren't horrible.
Yeah, but
unless you try to wring them out.
Right, but here's the problem: you put a supercharged engine in, you have a supercharger in this, and a capable engine, and in typical GM fashion, they made it to a 4-speed automatic.
Right.
Rather than giving it a decent transmission.
Yep.
To give this car a shot, they used a boring transmission.
Well, in the fourth gear was overdrive.
Yeah.
It wasn't. It was like first 3 gears were drive, and then you had an overdrive for highway miles.
Yeah.
It was like, oh,
it's like
come
when they came out with the Chevy SSR, it 4-speed automatic. Like it was the same. What was it, the 4TLE? I forget the name, but it was like the same transmission they put in everything that wasn't a truck. Got this transmission,
right?
And it did the cars no justice. They had great engines. Mm-hmm. Some of them. Now the SSR looks stupid.
Yeah, it does. Yes, it does. People they're becoming collectible though. People
I
actually
think it's 'cause
buying them.
Well, I think it's like the Aztec.
Oh, no, come on.
So,
Don't tell me people are buying that garbage.
ever since Breaking Bad, people are all about it.
My buddy had one from college.
They were ahead of their time. I'll give it that.
Then you want it? They're still ahead of its time.
Yeah.
Because it still hasn't come into fashion yet.
But the Buick Rendezvous was decent. No one shits on them.
That was an ugly one too. Don't get me wrong. It's all right.
Yeah.
But
Tiger Woods drove one.
yeah, I'm sure he did. I'm sure. Yeah, right. He sat in one for the commercial. I don't think he actually drove one.
He pulled up to like the tour event in one.
It's like Shaq drove a Buick too when he did the commercial.
And then they drove him a quarter mile down the road and they got into their Maybach.
I thought the Buick commercials where Shaq were hysterical. Yeah. Because when you saw him in it, I think they had to I don't think the front seat actually goes back that far. I think they had to create a front seat for him and nail it in. Because when he was sitting in there in the commercial, like his head, his shoulders, his head, his back were all behind the B-pillar.
Yeah. Or just put him in the back seat.
Yeah,
Have him drive the car from the back seat.
I swear to God, if they put him in the back seat, I wouldn't be surprised for that commercial. Some magic trick was going on there. And then, but the other part was like, I know Shaq's not driving a Buick of any kind.
No.
Maybe an Escalade.
Yeah.
Maybe a Suburban. Sure. But he's not driving that Buick LaCrosse. I know that for a fact. No one's gonna be out. No one's gonna be out in like L.A. where he was at the time. Like, oh, they're Shaq in his Buick.
Right.
No.
The valet is running out like, where's Shaq's car? It must be the Buick.
Yeah. Shaq gave that to his kid until his kid got too tall for it, and he gave it to like someone else.
Right.
But
yeah.
So the last car I got. Now, I can go one of two ways. I can go. We could stay with GM. Or we can go with VW. I'll let you pick. This is the last car we're going to do.
We haven't visited Europe. Well, we did with the Mercedes. You know, we just talked about GM. Let's hear your GM.
My GM? All right. 2014, so I'm still a little bit newer.
Okay.
The Cts-V Wagon.
Ooh. Okay.
The wagon version. See, the regular Cts-V for me didn't really do much for me.
Yeah.
The wagon, though, this is when they brought back the CTS Wagon, I was excited. Now, I'm one of those wagon fans. I don't own a wagon, but I'm a fan of the wagons.
Yeah.
And Cadillac brought back the wagon. Mm-hmm. And then they made a V model. Mm-hmm. And you could get it with a 6-speed manual. And it had the LS, or it was the Corvette engine that they dropped in it. And it had, if I remember right, this thing had 556 horsepower in a wagon. It had maybe 5 badges on the outside that said V. Mm-hmm. 2, I think there were 2 on the side. Yeah. And maybe 1 on the back. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yeah.
Maybe the wheels gave it away. Mm-hmm. But other than that, it just looked like a CTS wagon.
Yeah.
And then, but with that engine under the hood, it was going to smoke pretty much everything else on the road at the time.
Oh yeah.
It's crazy fast.
Yeah. Now, was that all-wheel drive or was it just rear wheel?
I think it was rear wheel only. Okay. For the V's.
Yeah.
The CTS you get with all wheel because it had the CTS and it has like the number 4. Mm-hmm. Like GM did that with like the SRX 4, CTS 4. Yeah, the 4 meant 4-wheel drive. So if it just had CTS or SRX on the back, it was just the 2-wheel drive model.
See,
maybe they had an all-wheel drive model of the V. I don't know. I'm not sure.
I just wish GM had kept the names.
Yeah, I feel like as soon as I figured out what the names were, they changed them again on me.
Yeah.
So like when they had, it was Seville and DeVille.
Yep.
And
there's Fleetwood.
But that's before the. I mean, the Seville and DeVille I'm thinking about are like the ones that got the North Star engines.
Yeah.
And they had the
Eldorado
and the Eldorado, but that was a 2-door one.
Yeah.
But the Seville, then the Seville became the SLS and the STS, which are just different trims and a little bit stiffer springs on the L. Or the T version.
Yeah.
Then you had the DeVille turned into the DHS or the DTS.
See, it sounds like federal agencies. You've already lost me.
It's too much. So that's when it started to get confusing for me. And then So then they went to CTS. XTS didn't come out till later. I think CTS was like one of the only ones.
See, every Cadillac to me right now is a CTS, and if it's fast, it's a V.
Right. And to be honest, like even right now, I couldn't tell you what the size difference is between any of these Cadillacs. Like Cadillac needs to change this garbage.
No, the Escalade.
Well, that's it. That's the only one they kept the name for because they knew they would lose brand recognition.
Right.
The rest of this stuff they have, I mean, like an XT5, I don't know what the heck that is.
No.
Apparently,
It sounds
it's
like
an SRX.
it sounds like something out of a Star Wars movie.
Yeah. I wish they would bring names back.
Yeah.
And for me, everyone's trying to be Toyota. Toyota's got like 17 different models.
Yeah, and they all have names.
But can we just go back, have 3 SUVs
Yeah.
and 3 sedans? Compact, mid-size, full-size.
Well, hey, Dodge is there. They've got 3 models.
Right. Yeah. That's more a necessity because nobody bought them.
Durango, Challenger, which I think they're shit canning, and Charger. So the only one that's like, cool, they're getting rid of.
And that with Chrysler's even worse. Chrysler's got the 300
and the Pacifica.
and the Pacifica.
Yeah.
That's it. I can deal with that. At least I know what they are. I'm not going to buy any of them.
Yeah.
Chrysler exists for Jeep.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
I mean, I guess most people don't even know that Fiat doesn't even own it anymore.
They don't? See, I didn't know that.
Stellantis owns it.
Who the hell is that?
Chinese company.
Oh, shocker.
Which is, some people say, there were a lot of Jeeps at Joe's outdoor event when he was doing his campaign. They were making inferences as to why that was. Jeeps only were there. Only Jeeps. But no, Jeep is what keeps the other two alive.
You probably Ram.
And Ram. You're right. The trucks.
Yeah.
They do.
Because
they're back to calling them Dodges now.
Oh, are they now?
Yeah, I think the Ram kind of got tossed aside. It's now like the Ram. Maybe not. Maybe it's the Ram Bighorn. I don't know. I could be wrong. If you know out there, let us know. Little call to action there. They tell us to do that every once in a while. They want us to tell you to do something. Like, I don't want to tell you to do anything. But if you feel like it and want to correct us, go right ahead.
Yeah, please do.
But yeah, but those. So those were 10 cars that we thought were sleepers. Can pull up to you at the supermarket, smoke you at the red light. We're gonna try and do some more car shows in the future. Something like I like this, like the top 5 versions. I like that.
It's fun.
It's fun for us just because we both like cars, but we're not wrenching every day. So
No.
and I certainly don't know enough to start a whole YouTube channel over it. Like the guys over at Donut Media, they do this great. But if you can, please like, subscribe, comment, share this video, podcast, or wherever you're hearing us. And we hope you like the show, and we will talk to you next time.